Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the starter in a 2008 Honda Accord. This guide can also be used on other vehicles with a 2.4 liter engine, such as the Honda CR-V, Acura TSX, and others. If you find any part of this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up as it really helps the channel. Also, if you want to watch more Honda videos the moment we release them, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. With all of that out of the way, let's jump right in. In order to access the starter, we need to remove the intake manifold. And in order to remove the intake manifold, there are quite a few things that we need to get out of the way first. Don't get discouraged, as I will walk you through each section step by step so you can do it without issue. First, we need to remove the plastic shroud around the top of the bumper. These are secured with plastic push clips. You will probably break a few of these as they are pretty fragile, especially since this car was made in 2008. I'm using a special clip removal tool. I have it linked in the description below if you are interested, as well as every other tool I use in this video. Once you have removed all 8 clips, you can then remove the plastic shroud. You can pull up on the hood latch and make it easier to remove also. And there we go. Now we need to remove this tube that helps direct air into your air filter. These are also secured with 2 plastic clips. Once that's removed, just pull up on the tube and it should come free. Next, we need to disconnect the battery to cut off all power to the car. Just remove the negative terminal with a 10mm socket and push it out of the way. I didn't remove the battery yet, but you will see me remove it shortly. This will give you more access to the throttle body and the bottom bolt to the intake manifold. Now grab your 10mm socket and loosen the 2 hose clamps on your intake tube. Push the tube out of the way. Before removing your throttle body, you need to push this tab out and lift up on the plastic piece. Next, grab your 12mm socket and remove the 4 bolts holding the throttle body in place. Be careful, there are 2 silver brackets on the back that you need to grab after removing the 4 bolts. As you can see, I should have removed the battery and the battery tray before doing this. This will give you a lot more room to work with on these bolts. Once those bolts are removed, I decided to finally remove it. So grab your 10mm socket and loosen the positive terminal on the battery. Remove the terminal and push it out of the way. If you don't have a bracket like this, you can just remove the battery without issue. If you have a bracket, you will need to do one of 2 things. The first you can do is loosen these bolts at the top to relieve the tension holding the battery down. Or you can try to push down on the bracket and then twist one way or another. This looked extremely easy on video because this battery tray was broken in the back. So once I grabbed it, it seemed to come apart. Hopefully yours will be just as easy. Once you remove the battery bracket, just pull the battery out. Then you need to get a pair of pliers and detach the wire harness connected to the battery tray. Just squeeze the plastic tab and pull away from the tray. Once that's removed, you should be able to pull up on the battery tray to remove it. If you're having issues getting yours out, leave me a comment below. Now let's get that engine cover off. This is secured with 2 10mm bolts. Remove those and pop the cover off. Next, remove this bolt holding a bracket for a wire harness to the manifold. This will allow you to move the manifold out of the way later. I believe this was a 10mm bolt. Now this bolt is kind of hard to get to but necessary to remove. This is a 12mm bolt securing the bottom of the intake manifold. Remove that and then we can move on to the top of the manifold. Next, you can remove these 2 vacuum hoses right here. I only removed one, but you will see me remove the other one later. Now there are 4 12mm bolts and 2 12mm nuts holding the intake manifold in place. So 6 12mm bolts and nuts holding the top and sides of the intake manifold must be removed. A couple of them are hidden, so follow exactly where I'm placing my electric ratchet and pause the video between each bolt and nut if you need to. Once those are all removed, you need to relocate these two vacuum lines behind the white bracket that holds them in place. Pull them to the right, then towards the front of your car. And finally, tuck both of them behind the white bracket that held them in place. Now you need to remove this blue electrical connector right here. Just push down on the back of the tab and it should slide right off. Next, remove the other vacuum line that it should have removed earlier. Now, pull the manifold back and get ready to remove the other vacuum line on the inside. Use pliers to move the hose clamp out of the way and then pull the vacuum line off. This will probably take some effort, so be prepared. Your intake manifold, just push it off to the side. There is a 12mm bolt holding this wire harness in place. It's tricky to get to. As you can see, you cannot simply access it under this tube. What you need to do is go over the top of the tube with a swivel socket. That should give you enough clearance to get the bolt out. Just make sure you don't drop it and lose it behind there.
Uh-oh.
I got lucky and was able to get this bolt out with a magnet. Now disconnect this electrical connector. All you have to do is push the tab on the back and it should slide right off. Next, let's get this wire harness out of the way. Grab your pliers and squeeze the tabs together and push through the bracket. And there is one last electrical connector to remove in the back here. Again, just push the tab on the back and it should come right off. Now we can remove the two bolts holding the starter in. The top bolt is a 14mm. I decided to use this ratcheting wrench. If it is too difficult to break loose, you can put a bar, or in my case, I use my Ryobi tool to assist me. Just place it underneath and pull up. This should help break loose the bolt so you can remove it altogether. And now we get to the fun bolt. This is a 17mm bolt and it took me an hour and a half to remove. You'll see why later. My electric wrench didn't have enough power. The ratcheting wrench worked for a few turns. And my socket wrench just stopped turning as the bolt decided to get harder and harder to turn. Now, I didn't have a breaker bar on hand this day, so I had to improvise. I took the middle part of a jack out and then used the jack to help me get enough leverage to turn this bolt. This bolt was insanely difficult to remove. Let's fast forward so I can show you what to do next. So, the bolt finally came free and I removed the starter. Now, before you install the new starter, you want to compare it to the old one to make sure it's identical. If there are any differences, you may need to return it for another one. Now put the starter in, making sure the teeth face the opening to your flywheel. I installed the 14mm top bolt first and zipped it in with my electric ratchet. Then I moved on to the 17mm bottom bolt. I threaded it in by hand and then tried to use the electric ratchet, hoping it would thread all the way. Not a chance. I then made the decision that I wasn't going to thread it completely into the engine because it would be too difficult to remove later. I would return the following weekend to remove it again and either replace it or fix it. Now plug the electrical connector in the back. Then install your 12mm bolt. And don't forget about the other electrical connector in the front. Alright, so here we are a week later. I'm going to detach this wire harness to give myself some extra room. Now I'm going to show you two more ways to remove a stuck bolt. The first is with the breaker bar. Typically, this works really well when you have plenty of room to move around, since mine isn't a ratcheting type of breaker bar. As you can see, it can be annoying because I have to keep taking it off the bolt in order to turn it. Now, here's the second method. You can take your ratchet and then use a pipe or something that can go over the end of the ratchet like this. Now, you don't have to take the socket off the bolt, and this gives you more leverage to easily get the bolt off. Remove the bolt, and once the camera adjusts, you can see why I was having such an issue. These threads were destroyed. That's why I was having such a hard time taking it off and putting it back on. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a replacement bolt, so I decided to see if I could fix this one instead. I'm going to use a grinder to shave the busted up threads down. But before I do that, I want to make sure this bolt will have something to grab onto. So I found another bolt that was about the same length, but thinner, and put it through the hole. As you can see right here, the bolt actually sticks out pretty far. This gives me confirmation that grinding down the end of the bolt won't prevent the bolt from doing its job. So I busted out the grinder and basically made the end smooth, as you can see right here. I also took a wire brush and cleaned out the threads as much as I could. Now let's see if that helped or not. I noticed immediately it was easier to thread into the hole, and I also didn't need a breaker bar. As you can see, I was able to thread the bolt all the way back in with just a regular ratchet. The next time this bolt needs to be removed, we shouldn't have an issue. Once that is complete, you can reinstall everything. Here's the intake manifold going back in. I forgot to record this part, but don't forget to install the vacuum line on the inside of the intake manifold. Also, make sure all hoses and wires are out of the way when putting this back in place. And make sure you secure the two vacuum hoses on the left of the manifold back into the white bracket. Now you can install all of your nuts and bolts for the intake manifold. Remember, these are all 12mm. Also, I know some people feel differently about this, but in my unprofessional opinion, you do not have to start from the inside and work your way out when tightening these bolts. Other items are different, like valve covers, because of the gasket that is used. However, this is just an intake manifold. If you want to do it that way, you are more than welcome to. After all, it is your car. If this was my car, I wouldn't care either way. However, since this is a friend's car, I decided I would be safe and tighten them from the inside out. Once those are all tight, you can put the vacuum lines back in place. Push them on, then slide the clamp up. Then, push the blue electrical connector back into place. And don't forget about this wire bracket. This was secured with that 10mm bolt. Now grab the two brackets for the throttle body and make sure these two holes line up with the two tabs coming off the intake manifold. This is what the throttle body holds onto to keep the throttle body mounted to the intake manifold. Once those brackets are in place, line up your throttle body and start screwing in the 12mm bolts by hand. After all 4 bolts are finger tight, you can use an electric ratchet or a regular socket wrench to get them hand tight. If you are using an electric ratchet, do not over tighten these. Immediately stop when the ratchet gets tight. You can see me going back over the bolts with a socket wrench to make sure they are hand tight. Again, you do not want to over tighten these. And don't forget this plastic clip. Just push down to secure it back to the throttle body. Now grab your intake tube and push it back into place with the throttle body and the filter box. Secure the two 10mm hose clamps. Put your battery tray back in and make sure you secure that wire harness again. Place your battery into the tray and then place the battery shroud around it. Once that is complete, you can then secure the terminals to the battery. First start with the positive, which is red, then connect the negative, which is black. Secure both with the 10mm bolts attached to the terminals. If you still have your positive terminal cap, put it back in place. Now all you need to do is put the battery brace back in. Place it over top and maneuver the post. If you have done it correctly, it should look something like this on the front and back. Next, you need to put your ram air tube back into place. Just push it back into place and then install the two plastic tabs in the front. Same thing with the plastic shroud that goes on top of the front bumper. Don't forget to lift your hood latch up. Then secure it with the plastic push tabs. Your engine cover is easy. There's a little grommet here that secures it to the post on the engine. Once you get that in place, you should be able to easily screw in the 10mm bolts by hand. Make sure they are hand tight with your ratchet or wrench when you are done. All that's left is to start the engine to make sure it works and you don't have a check engine light. That's it for this video. If you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up as it really helps with the algorithm. Also, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss a video from our channel. Thanks for watching and we'll see you on the next one.